Since the dawn of time, when mankind first started to paint cows on cave walls, we as a species have always looked for the perfect story. From Homer to Shakespeare, we have seen so many brilliant storytellers come about, but with the written word and now the movie frame. We can build off the works of others and improve how we make our stories. To this day, new movies, books, and TV shows are released every month, all struggling to unlock that perfect blend of well written characters, jaw dropping action, and well executed plot. However, most people do not know this, but there was a visionary, perhaps a modern Shakespeare or Homer, who mastered 3D animation to deliver what is without a doubt indeed that perfect story that master storytellers have been striving for. In 2009, animator Jeff Liu finally achieved that perfect story when he finished his animated masterpiece, Killer Bean Forever. People say that there are only really 7 stories. I'd argue there are only 2. Killer Bean and Hot Trash. Killer Bean Forever chronicles the adventures of Killer Bean, an elite assassin on a mission to Beantown. Here he discovers some shocking revelations about the way the Bean world works, and with Jeff following it up with a fun little short and several new episodes, I'm strapped into the world of Killer Bean, baby, and I refuse to unbuckle my seatbelt. So without further ado, I'm going to be ranking Killer Bean's franchise outings. Killer Bean Forever, The Return of Killer Bean, and the 2 Killer Bean episodes. I'm also going to be including Jeff's 2 attempts at Killer Bean before the movie, his first 2 Killer Bean animations. They're not canon and also very cursed at times, but I included them in here just to get that full Killer Bean experience. I won't be including any of his gaming videos. Yes, they exist because I don't like lumping in true cinema with content. However, they are fun to watch, so I would recommend them. Still, if you don't have enough time or just don't care, before the ranking, I'm going to break down the complete Killer Bean timeline, from Killer Bean Forever to Killer Bean Episode 2. Killer Bean Forever, 2009. DJ Bean, the son of a drug lord named Cappuccino, throws a party with his gangster buddies in Beantown. Killer Bean, an assassin, asks them to turn the music down, but when they don't, he comes in there and just freaking destroys them. Detective Cromwell, a member of the Beantown Police, arrives at the warehouse, which is owned by Cappuccino, someone Cromwell has been trying to nail for years. He confronts Fagin, one of Cappuccino's lieutenants, who leaves after a brief attempted questioning. Killer Bean almost assassinates Cromwell, but is stopped from a phone call from his boss, who warns he is too reckless. Meanwhile, in what is implied to be Bean China, an assassin named Jet Bean received a call from his boss, who's calling him on a mission. At the drug headquarters, Cappuccino sends Fagin to kill Killer Bean for revenge for killing his son, DJ Bean. Meanwhile, Detective Cromwell finds Killer Bean's name engraved on the bullets he used to kill everyone in the warehouse. And he locates another of Cappuccino's warehouses where Killer Bean fights Fagin, and it ends in a draw, and Fagin runs away, and Killer Bean finds a note saying, "Shadow Bean, you are too late." Cromwell confronts Killer Bean and offers him a team-up, but is denied, and he learns that Shadow Beans are agents of a secret organization of assassins from one of his contacts, because he found the note too, so he knows about Shadow Beans. And Killer Bean, after wrecking some more of Cappuccino's men, is captured in a 3rd warehouse and tied up. He escapes and reveals he is not here to kill Cappuccino, which everyone thinks, but Fagin, who's actually Dark Bean, this traitor from the Shadow Agency who stole their database. This prompts Cappuccino to just bail since he doesn't want to get mixed up in everything. But before he does, he decides to fire Fagin and just gets, shot. And Fagin, reveals that the Shadow Agency has devolved into, basically guns for hire. They don't, do good anymore. They'll, kill one person on one side, and then the next day they'll kill one person on the other side. It's just who pays them the most money. And so he thinks that if he works with Cappuccino, he can, do more good on his own, independent from the agency, and so that's why he betrayed. And Killer Bean doesn't really believe him at first, and they have this tense shootout, and Killer Bean ultimately kills Fagin. but Valiant warns that he knows too much, and now the Shadow Agency is going to try to kill him. And sure enough, Jet Bean arrives at the warehouse and learns that Killer Bean has allowed himself to be arrested. The two battle, but Killer Bean wins, and he gets a phone call from his boss where he tells him that he'll be arriving to the Shadow Agency, but not to like talk things over like his boss wants. And he finds this cool car full of guns, and he drives away.
The Return of Killer Bean. The plot of this short is very simple. It functions more as a teaser for the Killer Bean series. It's simply about Killer Bean trying to get his car back from a group of mercenaries. He kills most of them and tricks the final mercenary into being blown up, and it's not really relevant to anything, but it's genuinely pretty funny.
Killer Bean Episode 1. There are two plots to this one. The first half is dedicated to several of Cappuccino's goons discussing what they're going to do now that their boss is gone. None of it is really relevant to the main narrative. The second follows Killer Bean as he breaks into the hideout of a former Shadow Bean named Kessler, who unleashes a swarm of drones that Killer Bean fights and destroys, and in the battle, Killer Bean destroys the central processing unit that Kessler has. Kessler tells Killer Bean that the Shadow Agency has something called the Tactical Evasion System, a group of particle accelerating satellites that allows the agency to teleport every 4 hours. Kessler needs his CPU to predict their next movement, and mentions Reximus, an arms dealer and pro gamer that owns one of the few CPUs. Kessler gives Killer Bean the location of Reximus and a robot called Max, who changes personalities as he upgrades, and Killer Bean leaves to his mission.
Killer Bean Episode 2. During one of Reximus's gaming rounds, his assassin Sniper comes in to tell him that Mr. Latte, a buyer who wants a CX-1 plasma cannon, has arrived. This distracts him and causes him to lose the round. One of the kids mocks Reximus, angering him, so he looks up the kid's IP address and sends a missile to blow up the kid's house. Max and Killer Bean appear on one of the rooftops. Max locates the CPU in Reximus. The plan is for Killer Bean to sneak into the building, but he and Max begin to argue, during which Max goes through multiple personalities. Sniper begs Reximus not to blow the deal, but after a supposed stupid question, Reximus murders Mr. Latte. One of his employees, seeing Reximus is easily angered, exploits this and tricks him into murdering several of his guards, winning Employee of the Month for himself. Killer Bean attacks Reximus's guards, killing 3 of them. However, Sniper climbs to a rooftop and fires at Killer Bean. The episode ends on a cliffhanger. It is unclear if he survives.
Number 6. The Killer Bean. As far as I can tell, this was Jeff's first attempt at a Killer Bean animation, and
oh my gosh.
Okay. This is very clearly a first foray into the world of animation. This dates to 1996, where it was apparently recorded on a VHS tape. So even with the 4K remaster and noise reduction, it is still very, very 90s CGI. The background is simple, the animation is certainly something, and then there's this line delivery.
What do we do, boss? Run!
Despite all of this, there's clear effort and a vision behind this. It just feels constrained to the tools of the time, and it's the reason I can't really clown on this a lot. Sure, yeah, the animation is really, really wonky, and there's definitely things to laugh at. Probably would make for some good content too. But this is clearly a storyteller with a story he wants to tell, and when you're a self-taught animator in 1996, doing all the voices and rendering everything yourself, it's hard, and I can sympathize with that. It just feels constrained by the rendering tools, the voice recordings, all of it. And I'm really glad Jeff got the skills and tools he needed, because the world he's built is glorious. On the matter of the story, it's clear this Killer Bean has not been fully conceived. That's an understatement. First of all, they aren't even beans. They're like bouncy blobs of color. Jelly beans maybe, but I don't know. The story is nothing like Killer Bean Forever or any of the Killer Bean episodes. It follows Killer Bean captured by bad guys who don't know who he is. Then they fight and Killer Bean wins, and the music is very James Bondy for some reason, and the fighting and concept seems awesome, just tools of the time, which makes sense as the action has always been the strongest point of the franchise in my opinion.
There are some similarities between Killer Bean Forever's story and this. It kind of mirrors the scene in which Killer Bean is caught by the drug lord Cappuccino, and the scene where Killer Bean is just slapped so many times is here. Still, the animation is much more exaggerated. The Killer Bean is not a bean, and it all has a long way to go. This falls last, but not because I dislike it necessarily. I've made it clear I sympathize with Jeff. He probably just didn't have the tools to make his movie yet. But with each new outing, Jeff improved, and that brings us to what I believe is his second Killer Bean animation. Falling in at number 5 is Killer Bean 2.1 The Party. This was Jeff's second attempt at the Killer Bean, and it's clear he's improved a lot since the Killer Bean. In fact, this short actually won awards, and Iranian Entertainment Network gave it the Best Animation and Best Director of Animation awards in 2000, and gave it the #1 spot on their top 10 web films of 2000 list. It was also featured on the cover of 3D World magazine, issue 38, and was ranked 28 of the 50 greatest 3D projects ever of issue 40, and was in an 8-page spread. 8-page spread of issue 9 of that magazine. It was also called one of the most enjoyable gunfight sequences in a long time by Ebert and Roper, and even made it onto Entertainment Weekly. This short is insane. It's actually crazy how big this was. Then again, take this all for a grain of salt. I don't have a 100% reliable source for this. It's from the Killer Bean Wiki, which I trust because I don't think anyone cares enough to spread misinformation. Yes, I researched this. I'm a crazy person, whatever. If I'm going to do a bit, I know I'll put in too much effort. It's the reason this is so long. I actually find this short pretty charming. Sure, on its own, it can be very bizarre, but in comparison, the animation's improved a lot. They are at least some form of beans this time. The action is well done, and overall it is pretty fun. It just feels constrained like the last one did. Still, the animation's a lot better, and even if there's an exaggerated movement here and there, it's much more recognizable when compared to Killer Bean Forever, or in the rest of the franchise. In fact, while the Killer Bean is almost unrecognizable from the main Killer Bean franchise, there are some very sharp parallels here. This is obviously an early foray of what would become really the first scene of Killer Bean Forever. The dance party with DJ Bean and his crew, which is probably the first scene that Jeff finished, given that it's the first thing he posted after the trailer dropped for his movie. Because Jeff is such a legend that he decided that the first couple of minutes of Killer Bean Forever would not be character work or exposition, just some beans popping off to some music. It's beautiful. The story of this is still self-contained. It's just a 7-minute short in its own universe. It follows Killer Bean, who doesn't wear his red vest or hold his iconic dragon guns, but at least wears something resembling a costume, something to distinguish himself from the other beans. And this Killer Bean is upset because he can't get any sleep because the party near him is too loud. After calling an early version of the character of DJ Bean, who refuses to turn it down, Killer Bean comes in, fights everybody, and kills them all, except DJ Bean, who escapes to the rooftop with the CD. Killer Bean confronts him because he wants the CD for some reason. They have a Matrix action sequence, and Killer Bean wins. He gets back just in time for his alarm to ring and the short ends. So yeah, it is very, very similar to the first scene of Killer Bean Forever. The plot is the same. Beans are vibing in the warehouse. Killer Bean gets angry and asks them to turn it down. DJ Bean refuses, and Killer Bean comes here and they fight, ultimately ending in their deaths. This clearly was what the scene was based on, and I suspect it was Jeff's starting point to crafting Killer Bean Forever. Of course, the animation is still very late 90s to early 2000s, and they're a different kind of bean, but conceptually this is a clear first draft of Killer Bean Forever's opening. The difference being the fact that this is a self-contained short about killing people and getting a CD, and Killer Bean Forever is a movie about killing people and the corruption of an international secret agency of assassins who are beans. Still, the concept is similar, the music is much more similar. Jeff has ditched the James Bond stuff for more electronic beats that are present in the Killer Bean soundtrack. Even a line here and there is similar.
Who are you? Just a bean trying to get some sleep. Hey! Who are you? Just a bean trying to get some sleep.
Yeah, they are English in this for some reason. The action is very much different. The Killer Bean Forever shootout is much simpler. We don't see him slide across the ceiling on a handle and then shoot a gas tank. It's just a fun standard shootout. The dancing is also a lot different. And the dancing moves of the beans in both versions are a lot different. And I gotta say, the beans in this one are having a blast, obviously. But it just pales in comparison to the Killer Bean Forever beans, because in that, they are just popping off. They are vibing like it's their last day alive, which it is because Killer Bean murders all of them. But, I mean, he murders all of them in both versions, and they still just get some better moves in Killer Bean Forever before they die in the movie. And that's pretty much the one criticism I have of this. If there's one thing I think that this movie does better than Forever, there is this just beautiful and moving flashback after Killer Bean kills DJ Bean in this one that isn't in the Killer Bean Forever movie for some reason, where Killer Bean remembers just, popping off with his friends at a party or, going to the bathroom after eating too much. It's beautiful. It's great stuff. And I don't know why it isn't like in the Killer Bean Forever movie. I don't know if it was originally supposed to be and it just got left on the cutting room floor, but, it is what it is. And ultimately, I think 5th place is the best spot. There's an actual story going on, and the animation is leagues better than the Killer Bean. However, this is just ultimately massively outclassed when it comes to any entry in the Killer Bean franchise. And the story, it's not like I'm against an idea of just a standalone story that's not really tied to any overarching narrative. In fact, The Return of Killer Bean is placed quite high in my list, and that has nothing to do with anything. However, the concept here is just ultimately done so much better in Killer Bean Forever, and the growing pains here are pretty clear. And ultimately, with The Killer Bean or Killer Bean 2.1, I can't really rank them higher than any of the canon Killer Bean movies. However, I did enjoy watching it a lot, and I understand the constraints of, the animation of the time. So I give it a pass, and I sympathize with it. And I can understand why some of it is so cursed. The one weird thing about this, outside of the fact that this is an early 2000s animation about beans shooting each other, is this Killer Bean is so brutal and sadistic. So much more than Killer Bean in the main franchise. Killer Bean would shoot people, right? But he wouldn't throw a gas can at his enemies and then shoot it and have them burn to death after they fall off a platform. Look at him. Look, he's laughing. You like it. You're a monster. And in the original, the people he shot at the party were the friends of a drug lord, right? These are not good people. But as far as I can tell, these are just normal guys he murdered because they wouldn't turn the music. And sure, they have guns, but I would too. If there was a chance my music would cause maniacs like this bean to just jump in and burn my friends alive. It doesn't matter. I'm a crazy person. Regardless, this is still a fun little short that suffers from growing pains and the tools of that era. And with Killer Bean 2.1 in 5th place, we are now free to foray into the main Killer Bean franchise, starting with Killer Bean Episode 2. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Killer Bean Episode 2. I don't think it's bad, but I don't like the direction it takes the series in, and I find the thing to be pretty lackluster. I think I'll start it off by making the statement that I don't judge art by the artists in them, and yes, Killer Bean counts as art. And so the fact that Reximus is played by Maximilian Mus, in case you don't know, he's a gaming YouTuber, and some terrible things have come out about his actions and the actions of his fans recently that I'm not going to get into. However, this was made before any of this happened, back when he was just a popular YouTuber that Jeff thought it would be a good idea to have on. I don't think Jeff knew about any of this. I'll just be ranking the episode on how it continues the Killer Bean story and the story Jeff wanted to tell with this. Reximus is a pretty poor character overall, honestly, outside of the actor. The writing isn't bad, and I think with a good actor it could even be charming, but the performance is just flat and lifeless. The monotone voice drains all of the humor from his lines, making his character just not work at all. And, the concept of Reximus could have been a fun character. We haven't seen a truly unstable Bean so far. Most of the high-ranking villains, Vegan and Jet Bean, have been more calculating and competent. Even Cappuccino wasn't unintelligent. And seeing an unstable, emotionally undeveloped man-child could have been a nice change of pace. I mean, the writing is just bonkers. Reximus bombs a child for beating him in a game, kills Mr. Latte, his buyer, on a stupid question, and the moment where his goon exploits it to advance his own career could have been funny. It could have been reminiscent of the humor of Killer Bean Forever, where Jeff's wit just truly rang sharpest. And if there's one thing where the pandemic has really started to affect these episodes, it's in the voice acting.
Mr. Reximus, let me tell you how it is. I'm only interested in a deal if I can get a bulk discount. So if you're not going to offer me a good discount, I'm afraid I will have to take my business elsewhere.
The voice acting is just truly been hit the hardest. This isn't really even a criticism of episode 2, it's present in episode 1.
What on earth are we gonna do now?
I don't think it's even a criticism. I understand why it's like this, I can sympathize, but it has to factor in. But however, I don't think this is just fault. It is worth noting, though, because I've been able to look past it, but it just accentuates the already flat Reximus performance. And because Reximus just doesn't work as the villain at all, it's up to, the protagonist to kind of carry the weight here. And it's up to Killer Bean and Max to hold up the episode. The structure is simple. Reximus has a storyline, his deal with Mr. Latte. Killer Bean has a storyline, talking with Max while he scans for the CPU. And they converge when Killer Bean begins to attack Reximus's guards. Unfortunately, Killer Bean and Max don't work well for me either. There is a clear antagonistic partners, frenemies kind of vibe they're aiming for, but it doesn't work. Killer Bean is fine, but Max is not a character. When you have someone that changes personalities every 3 seconds, you don't have much to work with. Character writing is difficult, and the creation of what could have been a really unique kind of duo in this world just falls flat. And not to say this episode is bad, despite what I've said, I find it fun. The animation is stunning. Compare it to the Killer Bean, and it's absolutely mind-blowing how much Jeff has improved since 1996. The story is engaging to an extent, and overall it's a fun watch. There's an excellent sequence that shows just how good Killer Bean is at its job. The action is great as ever, but Jeff actually plays it down a bit. Not a lot of slow-mo, just quick, competent bean destruction. It's very fun and a new approach to Killer Bean action. Definitely one of my favorite scenes in the franchise. Jeff just does action really well. Like, I know they're beans, but it's actually just pretty cool. The writing is just a bit disappointing, since I know the legendary heights this franchise can reach. All in all, it's okay, and better than Jeff's first attempts at Killer Bean, but it doesn't reach the heights the others do. At the end of the day, I enjoyed this episode, but I do think there is a lot of stuff to improve on. And that brings us to the number 3 spot, which is Killer Bean Episode 1. Episode 1 holds a very special place in my heart for the character of Kessler, who is played by Twitch streamer Moist Critical. And Critical made a video reacting to Killer Bean, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of his most viewed videos, and Jeff found out and cast him. And because of that, Jeff, if you find this, cast me. I can be a goon or something, I don't care. I need to be part of this legendary mythos, this mythology, this modern myth that you've created. But anyway, you can tell Critical is clearly very passionate about this role. Just listening to it, you can tell how much he's enjoying himself, and it really elevates the experience.
Ravage, my children! Ravage!
Oh yeah, the animation is stunning. It looks absolutely crazy. The action is incredible for the fact that these are beans, and the whole thing is just a great experience. It's fun, it's funny, and it's a great start to the new series of episodes with a compelling premise. Well, almost. I'll go into more detail on this later, since I really like this episode, and I don't want to make this review the majority criticism. There are 2 complaints I have with it, but the one I'm talking about here ties to what's more of a problem I have with the larger series as a whole, so I'll touch on that when I talk about the franchise going forward. As for the other one, episode 2 really would be number 2 if not for one problem I have with it. That is to say, the other problem I have with it. This isn't really a problem per se, it's just that this isn't one episode, it's 2. You see, there's the critical portion, which I adore. Before that, there's a very weird segment about Cappuccino's employees talking to each other. I don't want to spoil it. Actually, it's less that I don't want to spoil it, but I don't even want to try to describe it. It's so bizarre. It's like a literal fever dream to watch. I could not capture the essence of it in any kind of description. Just like, what are you talking about? It would have worked better on its own, just as like this weird little sketch to promote the series. They're both fine, but really disconnected and have nothing to do with each other. It's like 2 shorts, except one of them is supposed to be the actual episode and the other is completely irrelevant to the entire plot. I don't know, it doesn't matter, but it is weird and it prevents it from being a second place. Also, the voice acting problems are really the most evident here. It's just a nightmare, and it's clear that the pandemic has really affected the series. But it's not Jeff's fault, it just is worth noting. Outside of that, I just don't have much to say on this one. It's just good. And aside from the next entry, it's the best at capturing that Killer Bean magic that made Killer Bean Forever such a masterpiece. It is the perfect sequel to Killer Bean Forever, outside of the one problem I'll get into later and the one I already discussed. The same magic mixed in with stunning animation and moist critical. It's just great. Which brings us to the number 2 spot, which is The Return of Killer Bean. Okay, I know the last one was probably shorter than the rest, but I literally have nothing to say for this one. It's just a quick, funny sketch meant to advertise Killer Bean. There's nothing wrong with it. The animation is great. It's actually funny.
Drop him or I'll blow a hole right through your car.
You wouldn't do that to a perfectly good car, would you?
I did it to my mom's car. I'll do the same thing to yours.
You shot a hole through your mom's car?
Yeah.
What kind of son are you?
Hey, you don't know what it's like to live with my mom. Always nagging me, trying to get me to move out.
You still live with your mom?
Whoa, okay, look. I'm doing the side missions. I'm saving up money. I'm gonna move out when... Hey, you know what? Why don't you shut up?
Look, I get it. Life is stressful. Everybody needs a break once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna give you a break. Do you like my car?
Wait, what?
Do you like my car?
Yeah, it's a nice car.
Well, you can have it.
Are you trying to mess with me? I'll shoot your car, Killer Bean. I'll do it!
It's not a trick. I could tell you're going through some personal issues. Just take the car, it's not a big deal. I can always get another one.
You're gonna give me your car?
I may be known as Killer Bean, but I'm also sometimes known as Compassionate Bean.
It's just some good old classic Killer Bean. It captures the magic of this world the most, and I just really enjoy it. Out of all the new episodes, it captures the down-to-earth feel of the first, even if it basically devotes all of its time to comedy. No criticisms, no critiques. With these top 3, I don't really have much to say. Well, that's not true. I do have a ton of praise to give to the number 1 spot, Killer Bean Forever. What else could go in top place but this masterpiece, this holy grail? I think Martin Scorsese once said, Killer Bean Forever is the greatest movie of all time. Finally, some real cinema. And I think he put it perfectly. But seriously, this is an actual movie. Like an hour and 24-minute long movie. None of the episodes were going to even compare with it. And I salute Jeff Liu. for throwing it up on YouTube for free. Seriously, I don't think I can describe the joy of watching this movie. I think I should probably start with the action. I know I've ranted about it, but when it comes to the action, this movie is just so genuinely and ironically fun to watch. Again, I've said this a million times. You'd think that the action in a movie with beans using ragdoll animation wouldn't be good, but Jeff Liu somehow figured out the anatomy and made fight scenes that are accessible to humans, and not just accessible, just fun to watch. And seriously, this action's so good, and there is so much of it. Everything from shooting and martial arts to scenes straight out of something like crazy 90s action movies, except with beans. Like, there are moments where Killer Bean will, like, grab a grenade that's thrown at him, toss it under his leg like it's a basketball, and just throw it back at the bad guy, or where he'll throw a grenade at a goon, and then when he runs away, he'll shoot him backwards into the grenade so he gets blown into the air and is dead from being shot and exploded in a matter of seconds. Or like when he's fighting Jet Bean and he kills him by firing bullets to distract him, so Jet Bean will do Wonder Woman bracelets to block it using his handcuffs, and then fire a bullet at him, and then fire a bullet into a bullet he threw, which launches a bullet into Jet Bean and kills him, and Jet Bean is distracted because he's doing it so he doesn't see, and that's why he dies. It's just, this movie is insane. It's just fun to watch. I don't know how else to put it. It's entertaining. I legitimately think it's more fun to watch than a lot of action movies. There aren't 50 cuts everywhere, and it's always clear what's going on. You could just turn your brain off and experience that glorious Bean action. Outside of everything else, it's entertaining. There's a good vibe going, and it's like a fun action movie, just with beans. But Jeff Liu, our Lord and Savior, he did an oopsie. He managed to sneak in some genuinely good writing into this movie. Oh, okay, I know they're beans. Yes, this is a movie called Killer Bean Forever and is set in a town called Beantown, but that's kind of my point. I went for the meme, but I ended up actually getting invested, and not just in the action. Like, I enjoyed watching these characters. As one comment put it, came for the meme, stayed for the bean, and I think that puts it perfectly. But this cast of characters, Killer Bean, Vegan, Cappuccino, Detective Cromwell, etc., like, you get invested in these people. Let's take a look at Cappuccino, the mob boss, who was probably, like, my second favorite character in this movie. I mean, he's just that classic Italian mobster. It's done so over the top, but it's fun to watch. Yes, the beat is Italian. Jet Bean is an Asian bean. I don't know how or why, but it's a movie called Killer Bean Forever, so just roll with it. But, like, I mean, just look at this man.
It has become quite apparent to me that some of you do not value your job. Now, that is quite all if you ask me. Especially in today's economy. But I am forced to say, it is time to lay off a few beans!
Oh! Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
Will I be eligible for unemployment?
Let me check with the finance department on that, okay?
My social security number is 346.
Or Detective Cromwell, my favorite character, the jaded detective Bean. Like, there's a scene where Detective Cromwell confronts Killer Bean, and he talks about he's actually jealous of Killer Bean, and he admits he wishes he could be like Killer Bean and be a cocky vigilante type and be able to go into a room and just shoot away all of his problems. But he can't and won't, because no matter how frustrating it is to watch all these criminals get away with selling their illegal narcotics and weapons and eggs, he believes in the law more than anything else. That is great writing for a movie called Killer Bean Forever, guys. And sure, it's not the most groundbreaking thing ever, but this movie isn't trying to be. The fact of the matter is, at some point or other, all of these characters are fleshed out. They all pretty much have motivations, and they feel like people, despite not even being people. And the reason they work is because we've seen these characters before, all of them. Not as Killer Bean, or Cromwell, or Vegan, and certainly not as Beans, but we've seen these characters all the same, which brings me to my next point. Killer Bean Forever works as a movie because all the characters are based on archetypes. Killer Bean, the wisecracking action hero who's too cocky for his own good. Cromwell, the jaded detective who's been doing this for too long. Cappuccino, the mob boss out for revenge because his son was killed, etc. And you know what? That's perfectly fine, and it can be fantastic when done well. There's a reason these are the archetypes, and I'm of opinion that Killer Bean Forever does it well. Jeff has these archetypes down to a T. Killer Bean is instantly believable as his role as, the cocky action hero. His first action is the film to get into a gunfight over some music because he can't go to sleep. Cappuccino's first scene shows him throw beans out of windows because they aren't carrying out his criminal plans, then vowing revenge after he learns his son has been murdered. Cromwell and Vega's first scene, where they meet, gives us an implied history and two distinct personalities, the cool assassin, jaded cop, etc., etc., etc. The point is, Jeff is good at doing this. We instantly can recognize these people who they are because we've seen them before. However, the fact remains that these are beans. This is all ridiculous. And you're probably wondering how I can genuinely, unironically praise this film's writing when these are beans shooting at each other. This is crazy. And the best part is, this movie knows it. You see, these characters are archetypes, and well-written archetypes, sure, but still, even with all the personality, they are still archetypes, and I think that if you took out all of the beans, made this in live action, or released Killer Man Forever in theaters, the writing would feel trite, and outside of some good action, it would flop. And I think while coming up for the concept of this, Jeff knew this, because if Killer Bean Forever took itself seriously, it wouldn't have worked. But it doesn't. The movie is extremely self-aware. I don't think someone could write lines like these and take this seriously.
I have reason to believe that it was done by a bean named Killer Bean. I'll need more beans. Professional beans.
There are constant jabs at the archetypes that this movie is trying to portray. These are beans. A completely serious rendition of the archetypes would have failed, but Jeff pokes at these archetypes, and in his writing, Killer Bean Forever almost edges towards parody at times, like this scene. Or this great moment.
Looks like what we got here is a standoff.
Not really.
Or this beautiful line.
Sorry, it was a double flusher.
But you only flushed once.
Look at this guy. His energy is just so powerful. He can flush a poo that would normally take 2 flushes just in one go. He's that strong. I'm serious. The joy of watching this movie is just incomparable. But back to the point. I think this style of writing can be great, but is also really dangerous. There's some serious potential for serious writing to be undermined. But I do think this is a rare case of the comedy accentuating the writing rather than undermining it. The comedy and the poking fun at the tropes and all that feels almost like a concession by the film. Yes, these are beans, this is ridiculous. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, when it comes to how the story is written, we can focus in on the characters and how they develop. And I think that these archetypes are fine, but can also turn out bland and stale. But because of the concession the film makes, that this is just pretty fun and loose when it comes to taking itself seriously, the writing actually becomes amazing for what is being presented to us on a surface level. It's just the right combination. So the characters work and the plot, which I actually haven't talked about, works too. Not going to spend so much time, but the plot was way more engaging than it had any right to be. I didn't expect a mystery story or for the pacing to be good, or for any part of the story to be genuinely engaging, but I don't know if it's because I vibe with the atmosphere and characters so much, but it was. It may have been accentuated too by humor. I think Jeff is good. It's good. I like it. I like this movie. Also, did I mention just how fun to watch every background character is? A lot of Hollywood movies struggle with this, where they make all of the goons or bad guys or whatever so lifeless, and it just makes it so boring. But the goons in Killer Bean Forever are just so funny. It's he's dumb comedy done well, and it really lends a lot of personality to the movie.
Is he someone I should be worried about? Nah, he's probably just some crazy lunatic running around with lots of guns. You know, that's the problem with this country. Too many crazy lunatics with guns. Ain't that right, baby?
Killer Bean good, guys. And you know what gets me? The fact that a normal human being, like you or me, Jeff Liu, someone with no animation experience, just a dream to become a storyteller, would and could spend years of his life teaching himself how to animate, teaching himself to tell the stories he wanted to tell, spending years of his life learning how to animate, growing, evolving from the Killer Bean to Killer Bean 2.1, getting better each year until, without the money or resources from a big fancy studio, just his own computer, a handful of actors, and his own creative vision, he was able to release his own movie, an hour and 25 minutes of his own vision, his story he wanted to tell, Killer Bean Forever. And I think that's pretty cool, and I have nothing but happiness for how Jeff was able to make this wild, crazy, hilarious, and genuinely engaging story about beans with guns. It took 5 years to make Killer Bean Forever, but he was able to do it. As someone who hopes to tell stories one day, that's pretty inspiring, and the fact that he hasn't stopped, that he keeps coming with new shorts, able to produce new stories he wants to tell, makes me all the more happy for him. Killer Bean Forever is a movie made by a person who taught himself to make movies. And I think that's kind of wonderful. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. I am a crazy person and spent too much time on this. This is the end of the ranking. However, I just wanted to include a little bit of my thoughts on what the Killer Bean franchise could where it could go and how it could improve, but I really truly love what you've done, Jeff, and if you see this video, you're really inspiring. Part 1, the characters. The characters were always the best part of Killer Bean Forever. You have Killer Bean, Detective Cromwell, Vagan, Jet Bean, all icons in their own right. The background cast had so much personality too, and their lines brought a self-aware humor that kept the movie afloat. Unfortunately, the characters of Killer Bean recently have been pretty hit or miss. Kessler works mostly because Critical is just having so much fun, but he's more or less a secondary protagonist. Max is an actual main character along with Killer Bean, and he doesn't work, and neither does his relationship, even though they've been through 2 episodes together. If Killer Bean wants to do a new plot and characters and episode thing, that's fine, but the new characters always need to land, and the recurring ones even more so, and as one half of the recurring duo doesn't, and the new character and antagonist Reximus doesn't, well, Killer Bean needs to settle down somewhere he can be for a few episodes, rather than jumping from place to place, and build out a background cast, a recurring antagonist, some recurring secondary characters to give the series a feel of consistency. Part 2, the plot. I don't know, man. This might just be a personal problem. Listen, I like the idea of Killer Bean facing off against Shadow Beans. It's a chance for some crazy action, and it would really give Jeff a chance to shine because he's great at this stuff. However, what I don't like, and I alluded to this in the episode 1 ranking, is the tactical evasion system, the thing that allows the agency to teleport from place to place. Compared to the down-to-earth mob story that was Killer Bean Forever, this has taken a turn to sci-fi, and that's sometimes okay. Episode 1 works very well for the most part, mostly because of the performances. I've made my opinions on episode 2 clear, but even for episode 1, teleportation was just too big of a leap for me to handle, and especially an entire organization. Overall, it stepped into sci-fi a bit much. That's fine, I'm sure it can work. I still don't like the teleportation though. However, the series needs to make sure it balances the flying robots and giant mechs with the realistic tone that made Killer Bean Forever so charming. Well, as realistic as walking beans can get. I also just want to see some Shadow Beans. The CPU storyline is fine. I understand this is the first few chapters of what's supposed to be a 10-episode series, But I just want things to get going. I want to see what the Shadow Agency looks like. The Jet Bean fight is legendary, and it's normally ranked in the top 3 movie fights of all time. It's so great that there's even a remaster of it that was released recently. Jeff saw that everyone loved it so much that he decided to just remaster it, to just accentuate the glory of it. And, you know, the point is, we want to see the Shadow Beans. It's 2 episodes in, and since 2 ends on a cliffhanger, it'll probably be 3 episodes in when the CPU arc is resolved. The whole appeal of the series is to see the Shadow Agency and how it operates. That was the cliffhanger ending of Killer Bean Forever. So let's wrap up this computer chip charade and see some Shadow Beans already. My pitch for episode 4. So this assumes that Killer Bean survives and gets the CPU in episode 3 and nothing else happens. Here we go. I think the goal of the remaining episodes should be to build a strong supporting cast of beans while advancing the story. My pitch for episode 4 would see Kessler locate the next teleportation of the Shadow Agency, scheduled in a month, an empty plane. Killer Bean would travel there, and there he'd find a Shadow Bean. They would fight, with the Shadow Bean winning and forcing Killer Bean to flee to a nearby town to build a base and prepare for the assault on the Shadow Agency. Max can come along, but only if Kessler upgrades Max to his final personality or something, so he can be a consistent character. Staying in this town, I envision it being seedy, deeply rooted in corruption, provides a lot of opportunities. First of all, staying in a consistent location allows for a secondary cast of characters to be built up, just like in Killer Bean Forever. Second, we can showcase the true might of this magnificent being with his base building, and we have a lot of moments to develop a relationship with him and Max. Now that we're actually building towards something, we can develop our new Shadow Bean as a consistent antagonist. There's a lot of potential in this series, potential that has been mostly realized so far, given the stunning animation and action, but there just needs to be some changes in the writing going forward. Anyways, just a few thoughts. Jeff, it's amazing what you've done all by yourself, and I look forward to the future exploits of Killer Bean. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe for hopefully monthly or bi-monthly or tri-monthly content. Stuff like this takes a while. Anyways, thank you for watching. Bye.
Wait, so, like, there's a timeline for Killer Bean Forever, and then it's in a separate universe from Killer Bean 2.1, because things happen differently. And then, if you have the Killer Bean, then that means that it's completely different. These are jelly beans, which means you have 3 different Killer Bean timelines, since you know that Killer Bean 2.1 and the Killer Bean are not connected because they're different beans, which means theoretically, if Jeff really wanted to get things going, he could, like, have the Killer Beans from the Killer Bean and Killer Bean 2.1, like, cross over, and they could fight Killer Bean from the main timeline, and there could be a time— I'm a crazy person! What is my brain?